Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Constant Taylor, and welcome to the show. Today, we have a very special guest, and let me tell you, you guys are in for a treat. You're going to want to listen to this entire program because some very powerful information will be shared during this show. Our guest today is Dr. Paul O. Radde. Paul has been a speaker professionally for 33 years. The content that Paul primarily speaks on is influence, influencing the decision-making, collaboration, and he'll speak more about that in a minute. He has a few books called Thrival and Win, Lead, and Succeed. Paul is based out of Austin, Texas. Paul, great to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Constant.
Now, before
good to be here. It's a nice, warm, sunny day in Austin, Texas.
Great. I know it's you guys get pretty hot weather there all year round.
Indeed, we do. That's why many of us live here.
All right. I'd like to kick off the show by asking you to tell us about your speaking business and the types of groups that you speak to and the content that you cover with them.
Okay, excellent. Let me just tell you, first of all, I started out as a trainer, and I worked with 24 different federal agencies in Washington, D.C., where I lived for 25 years. I've done a lot of organizational development consulting with such groups as the blood supply people with the American Red Cross, as well as numerous other organizations, and also done work with the New York City police chiefs. Back in the days when you may have seen the movie Serpico, when they had a great deal of challenge with corruption in the police department, they had to do a complete investigation and study and recommendation of what they needed when they came out of it. And they determined that they definitely needed stress management training, and that was the work that I did with them.
Okay, great.
But I've been in the business for 33 years. And at one point, I thought, well, if I can talk to a group for 40 hours a week, I certainly should be able to put together a presentation of an hour to an hour and a half. And then I started the transition over. However, it is very different to be a speaker as opposed to a trainer. And today, many people want interactive speeches. They want engagement with the audience. And so the training background is just perfect as far as I prefer that myself as opposed to a kind of monologue droning on from the platform. So one of my major topics is on presence. Most people are so overwhelmed, they're waiting for their retirement where they can finally let themselves catch up with their life and to be present and walking in their own moccasins, if you wish. They don't even have that experience. They're overwhelmed. They have so much going on. They're raising kids. They're worried about money. They have all of these trajectories which carry them into the future. They have the stress of the job. And so being present is a rarity. And you yourself and all of the listeners can just think about how many people do you see in a single day who are truly present? The lights are on and somebody is home. And you know that they're definitely home. And that just doesn't seem to happen. So my main topic, speaking topic, keynote topic is you must be present to win, lead, and succeed. And for many people, the satisfaction and fulfillment of success is really the opportunity to slow down and be present in their own skin, something that's rare for them. So another piece of work that I do is how to influence decision makers. Very often people who are brand new in a particular business, or as with the Presidential Management Fellows, who are all PhDs, MBAs, and JDs coming out of graduate school, law school, and entering the federal government, they very often feel like they're disenfranchised, like it's going to take them a long time of being in an agency before they have any say. And when I go in and work with them, I show them how much power they actually have. For example, a person new to a job has the opportunity to ask questions that no one else in the organization can really ask because they've been, for example, going to this boring meeting held on Monday morning, not knowing any reason why it's being held. And the new person can say, excuse me, I just wanted to know for sure, what is it, why is this particular meeting being held? Everyone else might just roll their eyes and look back or have a flash of fear because they dare not ask that, but the new person can ask it. The new person can also ask in a meeting, what is it you would like with me? I'd like to participate as fully as possible, but I'd also like to know what it is you want. Now, most people attend a meeting, they never ask that question, and very often leave the meeting not really knowing what was expected of them. So, the third area is collaboration. Many people will go to team building workshops, and yet there will not be a collaboration segment for one of those team building workshops. And the collaboration work that I do is very active. It's with the actual work group, people playing their own roles, and they actually take a look at what they would need from other people to do their jobs better. And then they actually negotiate with them on the spot, and they draw up new priorities and new ways of interacting. It's a very powerful workshop. So with that being said, I'd like to toss it back to you and see what else you'd like to know.
Well, let's dig into the fascinating topic of being present. I'd like to, there was a book that came out several years ago that hit the market that was very popular on the subject of being present, but it's one of those things, it's like eating, where it's like you don't just consume it once, but we constantly have to work on being present. I know myself being a habitual multitasker that I challenge myself with being present. So my question is, how do you work with individuals, groups, or organizations to become more present?
Well, I think, first of all, you nailed it as far as most people are multitasking because it just seems as if there's so much coming at them. And, of course, the research that's been done in multitasking shows that for some people it has a traumatic effect, actually. There's a thing, and I'll just deal with this for a moment, a thing called the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is effectively something that you see used on you typically in some of the different programs. For example, when they came down to the very end of America's Got Talent, and there are two people standing on stage, and the lights are flashing back and forth, and they say, in a minute, who will be AGT or America Got Talent for the year? Who will win $1 million? And then they cut to commercial, and then they come back, and the lights flash again and again. By this time, you're probably grinding your teeth, going, "Come on, quit wasting my time." But it's a real good illustration of many ways in which this Zeigarnik effect is used on us, which is holding the tension. If you really want to know the answer, you will hold your attention on that particular topic until there is closure. And that also is a very large basis for multitasking. There are things that you have a strong desire to complete, to get an answer to figure out. And so you will stay on task until you can get closure on that in particular. And there's and I'll just give you the little, and when you listen to that, you may be wanting closure yourself. And so there's a desire to go, finish it off. Multitasking, sometimes it takes years for some of the things that you're doing. In other cases, there are competing tasks, and there isn't any ready response or ready answer. And so multitasking itself can be a real drag when it comes to being present. Now, one of the ways that you help people to deal with that is intentionality. You help people to start looking at the fact that they are essentially inhaling these different tasks, and the process begins in which there's an actual tension in the brain to get a completion, to get an answer, to get closure. And if you know that you are actually choosing to get a response to that, you can start to at least prioritize. And you can also establish an intention which is not unconscious, so it doesn't keep you awake at night. It doesn't keep you grinding your teeth in your sleep. It is something that you can actually write out on a list and help yourself to work toward without it eating you up. You eat your way toward it. It doesn't really consume you. So that's one way. Another way is just making people aware of some of the things that eat at them, that consume them. There are a couple of things like trajectories. I don't know if you have any children, Constance, but if you do, the minute that child is born and you look into that child's eyes and you are the father, and you know that you've got about 23 years of an arc of 23 years to get that child launched, which may include a college education, a lot of expense, health expenses, and the like. And while you may not think about that on a day-to-day basis, the fact that you have that responsibility and you have a spouse is something that is like an undercurrent, like standing in the ocean, and that undercurrent pulls at you, the undertow, every time the wave comes out and or goes out rather, and you're not necessarily aware of that. So some of what I work with people on is not just what they're aware of, but what they're not aware of. What are some of the stressors that are there chronically, and how do you go about dealing with that? So there are survival issues. There are long-term goals that people have. And there are even things and believe me, this takes a lot more time than we're going to have here. But there's even people's concern about making it to heaven, if you wish. Mm-hmm. So that everything they do on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, is viewed against the salvation criteria. It's viewed against the survival criteria, and it's also viewed against the provider criteria. Am I providing? Are we surviving? Am I going to make it to heaven? And even sometimes helping people be aware of that makes a huge difference as far as they're able to know it's there and then be able to look at it clearly rather than having it kind of rear-ending them or whacking them in the back of the head. Go ahead, Constance.
No, that's great. I was just going to say, and also probably guilt plays a large part in that as well. Falling short of what you think you should be doing.
Well, I think you're right on. In fact, there are three things that make a huge difference there. Guilt really has to do with a kind of fear that you should be punished for something you did or did not do. I didn't do it adequately, for example. But there are two other issues in that, and fear is another one. And fear is usually sort of a fantasy of expectations of what might happen. It's usually of the future. And it usually requires getting mobilized and doing something about it, taking some action toward it. But the biggie, the really biggie, and the one that flies under the radar is shame. And shame is a sense of being unworthy, undeserving, and basically worthless. And people deal with that on their own. I mean, you don't necessarily hang out with your buddies and talk about, man, am I shame-based? I feel this way about myself. Everybody thinks that they're carrying that load by themselves. And it is a major load because you think you're the only one. Another one is distrust of human nature. Now, we're getting probably into more depth on some of these things and then going to have to leave them because of the shortness of the interview. But you just take a look at, people don't trust human nature. Well, do you trust your dad? Do you trust your mother? Oh, yeah, well, I trust them. They're fine. They're trustworthy. And they trust themselves. But I don't trust myself. I don't dare really cut loose. I don't dare really become as spontaneous or use all of my energy or be as creative as I might be. Yeah. So a lot of times people shut down their initiative, and a lot of times going into an organization involves just helping people reignite their own initiative and help them to start instigating things. And that's been my experience with a number of organizations in which I've I've had the opportunity to consult and spend time with them.
Now, just and it's funny because I could literally have you talk to you for an hour about this, and it's time goes by so quickly. But for the last 60 seconds, could you briefly touch on collaboration and what specific strategies you use to help organizations increase their effectiveness in that area?
Okay, well, let me just lay it out for you real quickly. First of all, I have measures of collaboration from 0 to 5. And then we come in and we break people up according to their role responsibility. So if we had administrative assistants there, if we had managers there, if we had team leaders or project managers, they would all go into their own role-based group, and they would go ahead, first of all, individually. They would rate their own collaboration with these other groups and also within their group on the 0 to 5 scale. Then they would go into the group that they're a member of, and they would talk about what kind of collaboration they might need from each other. And then as a group, they would discuss what kind of collaboration, what kind of activities, what kind of practices do you need from other people. And then they would actually go to those other groups and negotiate with them and prioritize what would be the first steps they would take to start getting that. What often happens is, for example, an administrative assistant may not know that a manager needs something from them, or vice versa. And particularly it's vice versa, so that once the administrative assistant says to the manager or says to the director or whoever it is, here's what I would need from you to do my job more beneficially for you. And that person hears that. That may be the first time they've heard it, but once they've heard it, they know that they need to provide that, because one of the jobs of a manager or someone up the line on the hierarchy is to be a resource.
Okay.
So then, once they prioritize, they share that, they can actually put that out on a grid in front of the whole group and share how they're going to be interacting differently, what new practices are going to be introduced. They are right there in the process of that workshop. They are engaging very effectively in the work of the organization. So this is not like a fluffy, let's go to Vegas and, spend 2 hours to justify our being there. This is a real work session, a real workshop. And they come out of there with direction and guidance as to how they're going to interact and be more effective as an organization.
Well, I'll tell you what really intrigues me about you and what you bring to the listeners and your customers is that not only do you talk about it, but you have specific strategies on how to approach and overcome these challenges. Man, I wish we had more time, because this is very, very powerful conversation. Now, in closing, I would like to ask you to tell the people, how can they learn more about you, what you do, and if they'd like to get in contact with you or your organization, how can they do that?
Well, first of all, if they'd like to learn more, they can go to thrival.com, THRIVAL.com. And if they're from the Pittsburgh area, don't be distracted by the fact that there's a Thrival festival going on there right now. They're just kind of leaning on my own personal intellectual property to put that on. So first, thrival.com.
Okay.
And then my phone number is 303-443-3623, 303-443-3623. And you can email me at Dr. Paul, DRPAUL, at Thrival. Once again, THRIVAL.com.
Well, Dr. Paul, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was very fascinating information that you shared with our listeners.
And Constant, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.